Buffalo soldier, buffalo soldier.
A photograph captures a moment.
Will you survive?
A newspaper clipping provides notes on the past.
Buffalo soldier.
But on the stage, history can truly find its voice.
Buffalo, buffalo soldier.
It plays on our emotions. It draws in our emotions. It speaks to our spirits, you know.
This understanding drove playwright Celeste Walker to document a tragedy that was surrounded by silence for more than 50 years.
It being a military incident, military had a lot of control. They still do. They have their own laws, their own justice. Back in the early 1900s, this was something that they didn't want the public to know about. You know, so they chose to put it under the rug, so to speak. And like a lot of our history, we didn't want to have to pull it out.
In June 1917, the federal government announced it was going to build a military training camp near downtown Houston. Community leaders were elated. One citizen even held it as the greatest prize in the city's history. Both the current and former mayor predicted an immediate rise of 25% in the city's population. Then word came that the first soldiers to arrive would be black.
They were probably sent to Houston because they were already in the Southwest at the time, and there wasn't really anybody else to send. It's hard to say that it was a really good decision.
I guess we just came up of being afraid of authority, white authority, because it was never going to be for you.
I was trying to give a sense of where blacks were at that time. I didn't want to show much of the action, any of the action, with the townspeople. You know, I just wanted it to all take place there in the barracks where we could really intimately get to know the men.
All right, listen up. Okay, we're in a southern town now. Colored soldier can run into a whole lot of trouble in a southern town if he ain't careful. Houston ain't like other places we've been stationed that way. Let the colored come and go as they please. It ain't like that here. They got a lot of rules for colored here. Got signs all over the place telling colored where to eat, where to sleep, where to get on the trolley and where to get off. Now, I know this might prove to be a bit irksome, but them the rules. I expect y'all to obey them because that's the law here.
An Army colonel, in assessing the tension between the soldiers and white Houstonians, pointed out the incompatibility between the handling of the Negro by civil authorities of Houston and the training of the Negro soldiers as pursued in the service, where effort is made to increase his self-respect, his respect for the uniform and for the authority of the government, and where he is given to understand that he may expect fairness and justice in the treatment accorded him. Colonel G.O. Cress, September 1917.
Moses! Joe Moses! I hear you threatened to turn over the Franklin Street trolley last night.
Turn over a trolley?
You heard me. You heard me. Now, I'm sure you wasn't the only one in on it, but that conductor member's hearing your name loud and clear.
Well, I don't know nothing about turning no trolley car over. I just know it's the last trolley going back to camp for curfew, and a lot of us kind of piled on.
It spilled over into the white section of the car.
Sergeant McKinney, it wasn't but one white man seated in the white section that time of night, and it didn't make no sense for half of us to have to get off and be late for curfew when we was already on a trolley full of empty seats.
I told you not to try to make no sense out these rules. I told you to just obey them. That's all you do. Now, do you understand that?
Yeah, I understand.
Don't you be bucking me, boy. I'll have you on dirty detail the rest of your life.
I think they sent them down. I don't really believe the government knew how bad it was, but they sent them down to Texas thinking that maybe they might make a difference, you know. But instead of that, the white people resented any Negro that looked better than they did or had any sense of any manhood.
And so you could see that they were headed on a collision course. They were equal. You know, they fought, bled, and died for America.
It's this town, Captain. It's got the men's acting like this. Now, you know Franciscus ain't never been in no kind of trouble like this before, sir.
And that Harden boy, they already corrupted him. Taken to the city jail for gambling. I bet that drunk Honoré was behind that.
So I don't think Honoré was
Ain't no excuse now. They ought to be able to take a little pressure. Franciscus, an MP at that. Now, he just brought it on himself.
Well, that's just it, Captain. These men been soldiers too long to take this kind of mistreatment without putting up some kind of fight, sir.
Sound like to me you can't handle your men anymore,
I can handle my men, sir, but I can't stop this here town and these civil police.
Damn it, McKinney. What do you expect us to do?
Captain Zerkis, sir, I've been hearing talk amongst the men, mostly grousing and grumbling and such. I know what they made of. I know what they can take, what they can't take, and I don't think they can take much more of this without... Captain Zerkis, sir, I don't think you ought to let the men visit town no more. No, sir, I don't. And I don't think you ought to allow those civilians to come out to our camp, sir. See, they has a hand in all this. They eggs the men on. They make them do things they wouldn't ordinarily do, sir.
I don't hear any of the other non-coms whining about closing up camp.
That's just the way I feel about it, Captain. That's all, sir.
They'd heard that one of their soldiers had gone into town and that he'd been beaten by a police officer and that he was dead. And they talked about that all day. So they knew they were going to do something. We had a neighbor, and she was very, very light-skinned. Her boyfriend told her earlier in the day, don't come out tonight because there's going to be trouble tonight and we're going to be shooting at everything that's not black.
All I can remember was we were trying to stay low on the floor, and we heard that the people from Camp Logan were coming around, and everybody was scared that they might come in their houses or something. As I was little, 12 years old, I just thought that was a normal way of life, that white people had the right, going to take your life if you didn't do what they wanted you to do.
The mutiny was the largest in the history of the United States Armed Forces. It attracted national attention because of its size, the number of lives lost, and the way in which it touched on the explosive issue of race. From the Army's point of view, it was a costly distraction during a time of war.
So I don't think that they were thinking about, how can we best represent these men. It was more, let's go through the process, let's get it done, and we'll move on.
After a brief investigation, the Army charged 64 soldiers for the first court-martial. The men were defended by a single officer. He was given 10 days to prepare for the trial.
The participants in the mutiny felt that the investigations and the questioning by their own lawyer after they'd been charged was going to be used against them. They didn't trust their lawyer. They thought he was part of the system, and they really didn't provide them a lot of information to conduct their own defense.
It was very hard to piece together who did what. The men had a conspiracy of silence.
Further complicating the case were the weather conditions the night of the mutiny. One of the commanding officers summed it up when he testified it was dark as a stack of black cats. As for the soldiers, in the words of one white witness, they all looked alike. The trial itself lasted almost a month. Then, on the night of December 9th, came the sentence. 13 men were sentenced to death, and 41 to life at hard labor. 4 received shorter sentences, and 5 were acquitted.
The only appeal or review was by the commanding general of the Southern Department. His office was only about a quarter of a mile away from where the trial was being conducted. So once he reviewed the case and approved the sentence, it would be carried out within hours, and not more than about 1 or 2 days.
The men's request to be executed by a firing squad was denied. 2 days later, at dawn, they were hanged. The Army carried out the execution in secrecy.
The news media was informed that the sentence would be carried out at Camp Stanley, and I believe that was done to prevent any kind of a scene at the execution site. But when they buried him, there was a glass bottle with the soldier's name and service number buried with him. And there was a wooden marker placed on each of the graves with just a number. These were mutineers who were executed for participation in a mutiny. That was deemed an appropriate way to mark the grave. It's sort of like someone being buried in a pauper's grave. Someone had figured out that the soldiers hadn't been dishonorably discharged administratively before they were executed. Therefore, they were authorized burial in a national cemetery. So in 1937, they were removed from the area near the Salado Creek and moved into the National Cemetery at Fort Sam.
The entire episode illustrates what happens when fear drives behavior. The citizens of Houston worried the Buffalo Soldiers' arrival would lead blacks in Houston to become uppity. This was amplified by the refusal by most Buffalo soldiers to adopt an attitude of subservience. As white determination to subjugate the soldiers hardened, so did the soldiers' determination to stand their ground. This tragic intransigence cost more than 30 people their lives.
Buffalo soldier, Buffalo soldier, will you survive in this new land? Buffalo soldier, Buffalo soldier.